And that jarring cacophony tells you you're back with the Power of Three podcast. It's a Monday, it's a book club Monday more importantly, and we are going to be bringing you another look at a Doctor Who novel from back in the day, back in the 1990s. Those days when the only ongoing series were from Virgin Books' full-length original novels based on the longest-running science fiction television series of all time, the BBC's Doctor Who. The new adventures take the TARDIS into previously unexplored realms of space and time. How exciting is that? I'm excited. I'm Kenny Smith, and I'm joined by somebody who's, I'm not sure if he's equally as excited, but he has got a smile on his face.
I'm excited to be talking about it because it's one of those books that is often overlooked, even though it is vital to so much of the range and to Big Finish and all kinds of things.
Absolutely.
I'm James Hadwen-Bennett, and I've been doing audio versions of the Virgin books and BBC books and stuff on YouTube for about 4 years now.
And they're fantastic.
Don't get your hopes up for me doing Sanctuary, though.
Interesting. Well, you don't want to know your colours to the mast too soon, James, but no, welcome back. It was great to see you again. And last time you were on, I got some lovely feedback and comments. So
brilliant.
So that's why you're back. But I don't, to be honest, I wouldn't have cared what they said. I enjoyed it, so that's what matters, bottom line.
Excellent.
So there we go. So yes, you've revealed what we're talking about today. We're talking about Sanctuary, which was written by David A. McIntee, a fellow Scotsman. It was published on the 20th of April 1995 with a cover by Peter Elson. And it was the 37th novel in the Virgin New Adventures range. And it tells of the Doctor being stranded in the Pyrenees with Professor Bernice Summerfield. And of note, according to TARDISfandom.com, we love their incredibly trivial nonsense. It was the first purely historical novel in the New Adventures range with no aliens or alien elements outside the Doctor, Bernice, the Jade Pagoda, and what they bring or make during the novel.
There is a wonderful error on the TARDIS Wiki fandom page about this book.
Oh, what one's that?
Because you know they do that wonderful list of characters.
Yes.
Yeah, Bernice has a nickname for one of the other characters in the book, and that nickname is listed as a separate character.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about. Conan,
yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, I saw that and I thought, that's thrown a spanner in the works.
It has a little bit. So, James, do you want to tell us what's on the cover of this one?
The cover is beautiful, but a little underselling. You've got the Jade Pagoda, the wonderful TARDIS escape pod, with its... the book describes it as looking Is it Mongolian it's supposed to look like?
Mm-hmm.
You have a wonderful mountainscape in the background, castle with flags, very traditional looking, and you've got I was going to say a knight in armour, but it's just like a character in odds and ends of armoury bit type things on a horse, meandering by, casually looking at the pagoda.
Yeah, it's a beautiful chestnut horse for those who are interested, of course. The thing that always struck me about this cover, I remember the first time I saw it and thinking, oh, that's a bit like Edinburgh Castle, isn't it? This was actually, the cover reveal came in issue 221 of DWM, and it noted that Peter Elson's cover for David McIntee's Sanctuary is the first purely historical Doctor Who adventure since Black Orchid was televised in 1982. I hate the term pure historicals because they're not pure historicals, because they've got science fiction TARDIS in them.
And I have other reasons for disliking that term as well, which I shall go into at some point.
Excellent.
It's very relevant to this book and comments made in it and about it.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm intrigued. Looking forward to finding out more about this. So, shall I read the back cover blurb since you've done the front?
Go for it.
The Doctor pointed at Bernice. "The wench's mind is addled," he said. "Arrest her before she spreads her ungodly heresy." The TARDIS is caught in the gravitational field of a dark star. The Doctor and Bernice are forced to evacuate and find themselves stranded in medieval France, a brutal time of crusades and wars of succession. As the Albigensian crusade draws to its bloody conclusion, men inflict savage brutalities on each other in the name of religion, and the TARDIS crew find their lives intertwined with warring Templars, Crusaders and heretics. While the Doctor begins a murder investigation in a besieged fortress, Bernice finds herself drawn to an embittered mercenary who has made the heretics' fight his own. And they both realise that to leave history unchanged, they may have to sacrifice far more than their lives. And it also tells us David A. McIntee has written 2 previous books in the new adventure series, White Darkness and First Frontier, both of which were extremely popular with readers. UK $4.99, etc.
$4.99. Oh, those were the days.
I know. You could get probably 2 pints and 2 bags of crisps for that kind of money.
The fact I was a student and could afford them, that was the main thing.
Yeah, unlike now, £16.99 for a hardback book, which is...
the next one out is £22 regular retail price.
And
it's getting, reflective of what is going on in the world.
Yes, very much so. So, before we continue, why don't we hear David's Prelude, which was printed in DWM 225. And this is read for us by another David. In this case, it's our very own David Steele.
Someday I'm going to hire a first mate to do this sort of thing. Lisa and Gwyn paused to shift their gun belts so that the blaster didn't scrape along the duct grating and started crawling again. The inspection lights flickered briefly as her shoulders rattled the cable that was pinned to the ceiling, and she froze. A faint, rhythmic pounding of limbs on metal echoed along the duct, closing slowly but inexorably. Computer? Is it just me or is that a life form on the move? Life signs are now in motion. The computer's voice came back over the intercom. Anomalous life form is currently traversing inspection way Theta 7. Must be heading for the filtration plant again, which means it has to come through here. She wondered why she felt glad of that. Getting trapped in the ducts with some hungry bug-eyed monster wasn't one of her reasons for going into the space business. Wincing as she banged her elbow against the side of the duct, Gwyn tugged the blaster free and rested it on the floor in front of her. If the creature turned out to be hostile. She slipped off the safety as the metal tunnel she was crammed into started to vibrate. Breathing became distinctly audible ahead. Perhaps, she thought, it'd be better to shoot first. Out here you didn't get second chances. Up ahead, something pale appeared under one of the inspection lights, its mouth a dark O. It suddenly froze as it saw Gwyn. She hoped it couldn't tell how slippery the blaster's butt felt under her palm. She propped herself up on her elbows to get a better shot, her finger tightening on the trigger as the lifeform's front limbs came up. "Don't shoot!" it yelled, the voice deafening in the confined duct. Gwyn's thumb reflexively put the safety back on an instant before her finger equally reflexively hit the trigger. She felt the blood drain from her face as the girl came closer. "Shades, kid, I nearly fried you," Gwyn complained bitterly, a shocked guilt overtaking her. She reholstered the blaster and started pushing herself backwards, beckoning to the girl who crouched stock still ahead of her. "Come on. This isn't a corporation ship. I'm not going to toss out of an airlock. Though I might be tempted to after that shock," she added mentally. After a few minutes' severe sweating, Gwyn clambered back out into the ship's hold and straightened up with some uncomfortable popping sounds before bending to help the girl out of the inspection duct. The girl had dark hair cut boyishly short and didn't look much older than 15 or 16. Though stained and worn, her clothes were clearly a Space Fleet cadet uniform. "Most runaways from the academy back there just slip me a few grotzits to look the other way when they come on board. I've never nearly shot one of them on a bug hunt," she added pointedly. "You mean there really is no such thing as a free launch?" "I think I will toss you out the airlock," Gwyn grumbled with a wince. She shook her head, recalling how desperate she herself had been to get her first flight. She wished she'd thought of stowing away. She envied this one's guts, if she was going to be honest with herself. "All right," she said slowly, hoping she sounded suitably put upon and reluctant. "We're far enough out from Beta Capricis that taking you back there would cut into my profit, so I guess you can stay aboard as far as Salastophus. There are always odd jobs to be done, especially in a military surplus ship like this, and if you behave yourself I might even pay you a wage." The girl nodded. "Sounds fair, Captain. And I thought you'd pick my ship especially for the sparkling company. Or is it just that you like second-hand tramp freighters? Lisa and Gween, but if we're going to be cooped up in here for the next 3 weeks, you'd better just call me and Gween. There's a cabin where you can bunk just along past the main lock. I always sleep on the flag deck anyway. Just in case? Exactly. Now, are you going to tell me your name? Or will I just shout, "Hey you"? Summerfield. Bernice Summerfield. That's hellishly long-winded. Welcome aboard the faithful pet, Benny, Gween said on the spur of the moment, holding out her hand. Benny shook it. Guy de Carnac wondered briefly if the star that flashed across the sky was a soul traversing the heavens, or merely a star that had fallen from there. He hoped it was the former, as then it might even be that of the girl whose eyes stared up from the muddy river bank. The old man watched silently as de Carnac closed her eyes and straightened, ignoring the water that soaked his armour. Why did she not say something? What could she? These things happen. It is a way of the world. De Carnac reached for his sword belt which he had hung on a bankside tree. That is as may be, but it is not my way. The old man stood aside with visible reluctance as de Carnac lifted the girl and carried her up towards the farm. And what is your way, might I ask? What are you thinking of? De Carnac paused, looking back at the frail and bald figure. Guess, he suggested icily. The stars blurred and streaked as the wings of the faithful pet shifted out of atmospheric flight position as she leapt into hyperspace. On the flight deck's navigation computer screen, Lisa and Gwyn could see a dirty brown globe displayed. Who would want to tramp around in a mud ball like that, she muttered to herself, leaning back in the seat and letting the auto systems take over now that the jump to warp was complete. The archaeological group now embarked consider Camus 2 to be of great value. That was a rhetorical question, computer. I suppose I really meant why would a bunch of academics want to come here aboard my ship? This is a military surplus scout, after all. Hardly a liner. No offence. I picked it specially for the sparkling company, Gwyn. Gwyn looked round quickly. Was she getting so old that her hearing was playing tricks? And I like second-hand tramp freighters. The woman that faced her looked to be just past her quarter century, but the tomboyish haircut was still there as she remembered. Benny Summerfield? Shites, kid, you must have done well for yourself. And Gwyn grinned as Benny dropped into the vacant co-pilot's seat. A thought struck her. Don't tell me you're the Professor Summerfield all the stiffs have been talking about in the hold for the past 3 hours? The one and only. What happened to the other guy who was supposed to be along in charge? Kyle or whatever it was. He couldn't make it, Benny answered curtly, and Gwyn looked at him narrowly. She might be nearly 40, but she wasn't going blind or deaf. Is that why you picked my ship? And Gwyn smiled, hoping Benny would realise she wasn't really pushing for information. Running away again? Benny hesitated, looking out at the approaching planet, which was still several hours off. Making a strategic withdrawal. Well, I'm flattered that you like my runaway service so much you decided to stick with it, at least for the moment. As I said, I like the company, Benny sighed. And you can't really run away from yourself, can you? Not on this ship, Gwyn admitted with more than a touch of concern. Some things follow you wherever you go. You just have to face them down. Next time, maybe, Benny agreed reluctantly. If I'm that stupid.
Thank you very much, Dave. So, before you pick this one up to reread it, James, what memories did you have of Sanctuary?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask this, and this is not a pleasant answer. I think Sanctuary is probably the unluckiest book out of the whole Virgin range. It is the absolute epitome of wrong book at the wrong time. Because April 95, I was doing the final revision for my A-levels.
You child.
And yes, although one of them was English literature, I'm predominantly a scientist, but I do have literary interests, and I did English literature. Yeah, this was not the book that I wanted to be reading whilst revising for A-levels. I mean, if you look at the ones kind of like before it and after it, there's some quite fast-paced ones, some really interesting ideas. And at the time, I had nothing against the pure historicals. I mean, I'd read all the Targets, but the Targets, I mean, Marco Polo was a 7-episode TV story, and the book doesn't exactly slow down. And along comes Sanctuary, the first historical, and the last one for quite a long time afterwards as well. And yeah, the bizarre thing is, I didn't realise at the time, and I wish I had, my late grandmother was a historian, and this was her specialist era.
Oh my God, it's never going to win with you, is it?
No. So, I mean, I hadn't exactly been brought up to despise things set in castles because they contained so many, historical Hollywoodisms and everything. But yeah, this was on a loser. And then if you think about it, this was April 1995. So I got my A-levels out of the way. And I thought, okay, I can go back and catch up on it. And then, of course, the BBC announced the TV movie. And it was it's like every single possible crack that Sanctuary could have fallen into. This poor book plummeted down all of them. I mean, a book that you need a dictionary by your side to work out what's going on at sometimes. It was difficult enough this time around with Google. But yeah, back in 95 was not the book I needed. Sorry, Mr. McIntee. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it wasn't my favourite at the time. At that point, first time around, I wasn't particularly big in historicals, possibly with the exception of Marco Polo. But I found The Crusade incredibly slow, even though we only had one episode at that point. But since then, I've grown to love it. And I think Wheel of Fortune is the greatest single episode of 60s Doctor Who. So my opinions can change. So reading this book was going to be interesting. But I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I mean, David could always tell a good story, but I think that the way in which he told it wasn't always the best. I think he's probably hindered by the word count, because if these had been like the length of the new series books, like particularly like the first batch that came out, with like Winner Takes All and that sort of length, where you're losing about 30-odd thousand words, I think this book would have worked far better in that format. But for me, it was overlong, it was overwritten, and I found being lectured with historical facts, show your workings, we're always encouraged to do, but sometimes less can be more.
Yes.
And now there's something that I want to bring to your attention.
Yes.
Because this book got a bit of notoriety in the Glasgow Doctor Who group. And James, do you have your copy there?
I don't, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, allow me to open my copy.
Do, yes.
And listeners, if you've got your copy there, please turn to page 45. And I'm not going to read it to you. Dave Steele's going to read it to you.
Evidently, a runner had indeed been sent, as half a dozen soldiers were just moving into a position to block the end of the street. For a moment, Guy considered charging them in the hope that the surprise would get him through them, but he quickly realised that the street was too narrow for him to force a passage through them by force.
For the benefit of our YouTube viewers, James just has his hand in his face.
There were a few bits where reading this, I did think, was the editor on holiday? Because along with, I did actually wince at that when I read it myself. There's some horrendous continuity errors in this in regards to other books. And it's just like, is this supposed to be the same characters that we've been following? And it's just like, reading it this time, because of course, spoilers, although Guy, however we're going to pronounce his name, which I have issues about, he becomes important to Benny, to the extent that, her kid is named after him, and he's referenced in the new series Adventures as well. I thought this was early days of Benny. You could get Benny's backstory correct at least. And it's just like, I was reading it and I thought, okay, do I remember who Kyle is, her former boyfriend? Do I remember who? And I just, yeah, there were so many bits where I just wanted to say, could the editor step in here, please? And kind of either rewrite a passage or at least give me footnotes so that I know what these words mean.
Yeah.
I say Google became my friend, trying to work out what the different types of clothing were that were being worn. Google also shattered my illusions about castles and the Rock. Yeah, note to self, when Googling the Rock for sanctuary purposes, it's ROC.
Not a big muscly bloke. I'm sure you were happy to see him, though.
I'm about to say, it diverted me quite pleasantly at times. Yeah, Google insisted, did you mean The Rock, ROCK? And proceeded to tell me about what he was wearing, which was usually not very much. Yeah, it needed another edit. You're right. Cutting it down to 50, 60,000 words, maybe. Because I think from memory, this is about 90-something thousand words, much of which is superfluous. It would have sped it up so much. But there's an awful lot of words I would have liked put in. And not just the kind of the explanation of what these medieval garments are. Apparently, kind of like there was the equivalent of a chainmail T-shirt, Haber something or other. Yeah. Some very interesting AI rendered images. Yeah. Because I said at the start, don't hold your hopes out for me doing a talking book of this. And it's not actually because of the story, and it's not actually because of the gore and everything like that. It's because I don't have a clue what any of these people sound like, what most of these people look like, and if it wasn't for the back cover blurb, I don't think I realised till about chapter 7 that we were in France.
Well, that's interesting, because when I reread this, I was in Salou, which is about 50, 60 miles south of Barcelona, which often gets mentioned. And I think for some reason in my head, I got it into my head this was set around somewhere in Spain.
Yes.
Well, there you go.
Yes. And as I said, when we've got Guy/Guy, you've got all the characters, and I'm just thinking, okay, Parfait Girard, Castellan confused the hell out of me because I kept thinking the Gallifreyan ones. Is it Guzman? Yeah. De Citeaux. Yeah. I would have liked a little bit more detail about the people and a little less detail about swords going up through chins and out through skulls. Yeah.
I mean, it is a very actiony book, as most of David's books are. You look at something like Lords of the Storm, which I think, ironically enough, had a glossary at the back, whereas this one didn't, with made up words.
This would be the perfect one for a glossary, yeah. And there's brilliant descriptions of the fight scenes and everything, and yeah, the setting is vivid, even if you don't know where it is. But I got terribly lost in the book about kind of what the Rock looked like.
Yeah.
Because on that cover, you've got the wonderful castle with its flags and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's what the Rock looked like in my brain when I was reading it.
Yeah, it's the fact there's a secret tunnel and things like that, and because to me it was on ground level near the river, and
yeah, there's two secret passages in the walls, which apparently, according to actual history, would never have been there. There would have just been holes behind tapestries and stuff like that. But yeah, there's that whole plot about the secret passage which come out by the river. Where's the river on the cover? Huh? Yeah. And the other question I had is that actually Guy on the cover? Because there's so few physical descriptions in the book of the people. I genuinely did not think that was him, because mentioned this earlier, Benny calls him Conan.
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, 95, Conan. That's
Yeah.
not Conan on the cover.
No, definitely not. I mean, it is. Yeah, and to be honest, I found that the whole Conan thing a bit irritating. It was more of an Ace thing to me than a Benny
Yeah.
thing, giving somebody a nickname like that.
Oh, we'll get to Ace in a short time. She's definitely on my list.
And in mine,
Not
but for
that
different
list.
reasons.
So yeah, it is a book that needed an edit. And so there were quite a few bits where I winced at the thing, and the editor forced his way through with force. As a physicist, I am quite susceptible to seeing that word appear.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a...
Yeah, but at least we know that we could use mass times acceleration to work out the force. So at least we've got that bit in there. So
Yeah, but was it the Cathares mass, the Christian mass?
okay, Mr. Science, we'll let you get that one out. Yeah. So I'll tell you what, let's have a quick pause again, and we'll have our first reading as the Doctor and Benny head for the Jade Pagoda.
Benny had been waiting only a few moments when the Doctor joined her outside the richly textured antique door, which was inscribed with the symbol of a fist and some Chinese script. The markings, however, were too indistinct for Benny to read under the dim and dense-seeming light at the heart of the TARDIS. The Doctor had a small bag tucked under his arm, which Benny assumed contained a few essentials they might need in a potentially hostile environment. She wondered whether there was time to return to her suite for some essentials of her own. A hip flask of something medicinal, perhaps, or a novel. The Doctor paused as he approached the door, his face freezing as if he just caught himself in time to avoid grimacing. A spark of brighter life flickered in his eyes again as they moved away from the inscription. He obviously doesn't have many fond memories of this bit of the TARDIS, she surmised. "Travelling light?" he asked rhetorically, and she shrugged. "You couldn't travel much lighter than with just the clothes you stood in. Not without risking arrest, anyway," she smiled to herself. "I have to leave room for bringing back souvenirs." "Very wise. I'll try to aim for a combined brewery and glassworks then," he suggested, pushing through the dark door. "How about going for Callahan's then? I've still to get one of their beer glasses." She followed him into the surprisingly cool interior of the pagoda. After the oppressive heat of the TARDIS's central areas, it was quite a relief. "Not after what happened last time, thank you very much. Come to think of it, you've never been to my restaurant either, have you?" "Your restaurant?" "Yes, a little place called the Tempest Fugit. Convivial sort of place, if I remember correctly." He moved towards the small central console while Benny looked around. The room was shadowy and cool, with small statuettes and wall niches. All the walls, floor and ceiling were of smooth, almost marbled jade, while a faint sunlight-like light filtered through from the ceiling, just enough to see by. The whole room had the air of some ancient oriental temple built into a mountainside, and Benny also noticed that there was no interior door. Instead, there were several floor-to-ceiling partitions of paper and bamboo. When she had examined the room, the Doctor had been busying himself with a miniature version of the central console. This only had 4 sides, with a triple-roofed housing for a small time rotor at the centre, and clearly held far fewer instruments than the main TARDIS console. The Doctor glanced up as she approached with a questioning look. "The pagoda is really just an emergency escape pod of sorts, so it only has the most basic of controls," he said. "Enough to pick a nice relaxing bolt hole?" "Not really. Most of these are life support and environmental systems controls." He made a few small adjustments to one panel, and the triple-roofed column began rising and falling. Watching its progress for a moment, he moved around and began typing instructions into a small keyboard. "The pagoda just homes in on the nearest location within specified survival parameters, so the best I can do comfort-wise is to specify a Class M planet orbiting a main sequence G-class star." "That shouldn't be too difficult," she commented as the central column began rotating to and fro. "There must be 1 million to choose from." "There are closer to 650 million in this galaxy, as it happens, or so the statisticians say. There should be one somewhere out of the nearest 460 or so stars. Knowing our luck, the nearest one's probably swarming with omnivorous wildlife. The odds are pretty long, and in any case we certainly had to make a time jump to avoid the time displacement field that was affecting the rest of the TARDIS." "Had? You mean we've already left?" "Of course!" The Doctor appeared to Benny to be confused that she even asked the question. "The pagoda left the TARDIS as soon as the door closed. It is for emergency escapes, after all." "I must be getting old not to have thought of that," she thought wryly. "And have we also arrived somewhere?" No, I'd say our ETA is about 3 hours. Subjective time, allowing time for the auto systems to home in on a suitable site.
I love the whole Jade Pagoda stuff. Doesn't it? It just sounds great, doesn't it? Just sort of very peaceful, sort of like the bamboo TARDIS. And I just love the whole idea of the Jade Pagoda. I can just picture it like the bamboo time rotor, the Doctor's hat on it, and all these things. And I think it's a lovely, lovely idea.
A bit that I had forgotten, and as a result of this, I am going to go back and read some of the earlier ones, because I had forgotten that this wasn't the original TARDIS.
Of course, yes.
And so we've had the Jade Pagoda, which was kind of loosely mentioned in Birthright and is the big bit of iceberg. And then we lose the original TARDIS. And yeah, I never understood how much of this replacement TARDIS had existed in the same way that our one had and everything. But yeah, the Jade Pagoda is a lovely idea. There was a mailing list called the Jade Pagoda mailing list.
Yes, there was indeed, yeah.
Long before the days of Blue Sky, Twitter, and all that lot. We had Rec Arts, Doctor Who, and the Threat of the Time Lash VHS. Yeah, please don't Google that if you're of a nervous disposition, or if you do, clear your history afterwards.
Thank you, Stephen Moffat. Clear that browser history.
I was thinking that from Fascinating Ida, actually. But yeah, it's a wonderful idea, and it makes you wonder just exactly what the Time Lords did with their TARDISes that meant they needed this really ornate escape pod. It's one of those things that, yeah, it's lovely in the books, but as soon as you start thinking about the implications of it, it's just like, And of course, you know, we had the scene with the Doc Holliday poster and the hospital. Basically, I think he had watched Invasion of Time just before this.
Yes, that makes perfect sense, yeah. Also, did you notice, look at the cover. Tell me something about the Jade Pagoda.
The windows are wrong.
Thanks, Stephen Moffat. No.
Go on.
It's blue. It's not green.
Yeah.
It's not very jade. It's the pagoda, therefore.
I had a theory, because of course, at the end of the book, the TARDIS takes the place of the Jade Pagoda. So I'm wondering, because of course there is that guy who tries to chip some of the jade off to make his fortune from it. I've convinced myself that the reason it's blue is because that guy on the horse is the one who's going past it, who's going to steal some jade off it as it transforms into the blue police box.
Okay, Mr. Continuity, I'll give you that. That works. That works. So tell us, what is your issue with Guy/Guy? Because we will find out later David McIntee's preferred pronunciation and why Dave has been saying Guy. Yeah.
It boils down to say the fact that if it wasn't for that back cover blurb, I wouldn't have a clue where we were. And yeah, because I do the audio books, I skim through and I try to kind of find descriptors of people's voices. Some authors are brilliant at describing the voices. They make it very easy. Because I mean, as I've said previously, I hear the voices in the head. I actually see it acted out in my brain. I had nothing to hang this on, and I genuinely did not have a clue what the accent was of anyone, how any of these names were supposed to be pronounced. In my head, I was flicking between really cinematic for the hack and slay scenes, and then suddenly flicking back to 4:3 ratio with Sylvester McCoy on OB kind of, you know. And yeah, I could not work out the voices. I couldn't get a grip on how old people were, how posh they were, how common they were. And this to me was a real problem because, you know, it's a book where you've got kind of, you know, refugees coming into the rock. You've got all kinds of, you know, you've got the apothecary, you've got the lesbians serving. Were they lesbians? I can't remember.
They're nuns, but they could well have been.
Well, no. The reason I ask is they did actually mention sodomy and people being killed for sodomy.
Yes, that's true. Yep.
And I genuinely, I was struggling to work out the class system and the hierarchy, because in this era, to my best of my knowledge, it was an amazingly class structured kind of world. And yeah, I think calling him Guy or Guy was a mistake, because there's the multiple pronunciations for it. And does that mean, going forward decades, Benny's son is called Peter Guy? Because that's kind of, again, isn't he going to question that?
Yeah, you would think.
It's one of these things that kind of, if you're going to put in all the references to the technical names of the armor, you're going to go to great lengths about the descriptions of Benny's still, of everything going on. At least give us a pronunciation guide or an indication of the accents people are speaking with.
Mm-hmm.
Because in my head, this was the BBC's Three Musketeers production, and everyone was speaking in received pronunciation.
Yes. Yeah, I get what you mean. Why don't we have some words from the author? And of course, sadly, David passed away in December 2024. But thankfully, he has talked quite extensively about this in print interviews. So let's have some of those. And we'll start with what he said about Sanctuary prior to publication in an interview which appeared in DWM issue 222 when he spoke to Craig Hinton. And this one has been read for us by Dr. John Bollan.
I submitted 3 or 4 pure science fiction proposals between White Darkness and First Frontier, and they got rejected. But then I submitted a pseudo-historical, and they need research, which I love. In fact, Steve Lyons calls me Mr. Historical. I love all those tabloid stories about UFOs. They're so easy to rip off. I also read all the stuff from the Flying Saucer Brigade, as well as everything about the US military at the time. And naturally, I watched all the stories with the Master in them. I find the hardest part of a book is the dialogue. Once you get that out of the way, everything else is much easier. I loved writing all the action sequences, all that James Bond stuff. And as for the Master and Ace, I really enjoyed writing for the Master, but a number of writers reckon that Ace is difficult to write for. I didn't find that at all. The writer's guidelines for the new companions, Quedge and Forrester, describe Forrester as a female Han Solo, but that's how I see Ace. In the meantime, I'm writing a story for Decalogue 2 with Sarah Jane Smith, K9 and Mike Yates. Sanctuary, my third new adventure, comes out in April. It's a pure historical story. I've always wanted to write one, and why not? The TARDIS is a time machine. And I've always found it odd that whenever the Doctor goes back in time, there's always another bunch of aliens lurking about. As fantasy writer Terry Pratchett says, it's as if Earth is metaphysically near the bus stop and close to the shops. I wanted all the characters to be human, and I really like period stories. I'm finding it very different writing Sanctuary after First Frontier. That was, let's do James Bond. Read Sanctuary, and at the end, you want to stick your head in the oven. The book begins with the TARDIS getting caught in the gravitational pull of a black star. In order to escape, the Doctor and Bernice use the Jade Pagoda TARDIS from David Banks' Iceberg and find themselves stuck in the 13th century. And when they inevitably get separated, the Doctor is taken off by some knights who think he's an envoy from the Scottish Church, while Benny finds herself in a heretic enclave. Then there's a romance for her, but it's all very coy, very Sir Walter Scott. It never goes further than holding hands. Then again, it's made clear that this is not going to make it to the honeymoon. But I wanted a more original way of ending it than the Doctor's manipulations killing the man off. Benny's past is explored, and we learn more about the disastrous love affair that she had in the past.
David also gave a bit of chat about his work on the book in his introduction to the novel, and that is again read for us by John.
Introduction. Like the Spanish Inquisition, I bet none of you expected to see me back this soon, and that's the only use of this joke that you'll see in this book. Before I get going, a word of warning. Though I hope this book carries the atmosphere of the period in which it's set, being a work of fiction, there is much in the way of detail here, which is, to coin a phrase, apocryphal, or at least wildly inaccurate. I mention this so that history students among you will remember to look up a proper textbook before quoting anything in exams or the like. I also mention it so that I can point out that such changes are deliberate. I paid close attention to many reference works, most notably Lacroix's multi-volume Of the Middle Ages series, and not made through ignorance. At least that's my catch-all story, and I'm sticking to it. Acknowledgements. Thanks and so on are due to all the usual suspects at Virgin, Stirling District Library's Reference Department. See, I told you you'd get them back. Daniel Blythe, Paul Cornell for the freedom to mess around with Bernice's past, Peter Elson for the evocative cover, and for advice on mysteries, not forgetting the noted crime writer J.B. Fletcher. And you can probably thank Brian Croucher for the haggis line, if you really want to. Oh, one further thing. You may note that some words used here should be taken a little more seriously than usual. For example, despite the jokey Hollywoodish use of it, a varlet was originally an undisciplined looter who scavenged the battlefield, while a bourgeois was simply someone who had bought their way up the feudal ladder to become, directly or indirectly, a vassal of the king, rather than some local baron, and not just upper classes. If we were to apply this distinction today, then the likes of council road sweepers who happen to live in towns would be accurately classed as such, for example. There are others, but you'll know them when you find them. Now, let me tell you of the days of high adventure.
And David spoke about it with another David, another Scottish David, in fact, David Darlington, and this appeared in DWM 343. And here's what he had to say then about Sanctuary.
One aspect of the last few books I've appreciated is that you're not overwriting as much as you used to. That's deliberate. You vary your style depending on the setting and the characters. Sanctuary has the most overwriting. It has very long sentences. I wanted to get that impression of a time where we didn't have so many abbreviations and colloquialisms. Also, if a story is set in a time where things are very different to how they are now, I like to describe more. So in the case of Sanctuary again, with a scene set in a castle, readers might tend to think of a castle as we see them now, stone walls and so on. But castles weren't like that, of course. They had plaster on the walls with murals and hunting scenes painted on. Whereas if it's a modern story and someone jumps in a taxi, everybody knows what a taxi is. Which brings up the issue of research. Getting the details right is obviously something which concerns you. Well, where it's not going to conflict with the drama, yes. One thing which bugs me about the White Darkness is the death of the Haitian president, because it's not accurate and it would not affect the drama if it had been. And that's because the reference book containing the details about that came out in October 1993, just too late to be of use. Sometimes reliance on research has a downside. I don't just mean the tendency to go overboard with detail, which I know I've done, but for instance in The 11th Tiger, I wanted to show what a historical character like Wong Fei Hung was really like. The problem is there's absolutely no material, no biography. The few stories that exist are fiction. That really buggered things up.
And finally, we've got some thoughts from David a few years after the event. And here's what he said to Simon Guerrier for Bernice Summerfield, The Inside Story. And thanks to Simon for sending over David's original text. And this is read again by our Dr. John.
The straight historical of Sanctuary. Was that influenced by Benny's character being a historian? Yes, completely. I was amazed it hadn't been done really early in her time in the range. Also, I'd enjoyed doing the historical elements in the first 2 books and always liked the historical stories, especially the Crusaders. Tell me about where Guy came from. How did you develop him? I wanted a match for Bernice, but also an opposite, a soldier to her peaceful type, a cynic to her optimist, but as intelligent and as much a philosopher. With that in mind, I had a list of character influences: Avon, Josie Wales, Sanjuro, Aragorn, pre-Peter Jackson, obviously. I also wanted to avoid him being a Mary Sue, so he's also a mix of what I'd like to be like and what I'd be afraid of being like. And is he dead? Either answer would ruin it, I think.
So yeah, you cannot fault David for his researches. I mean, he definitely does it, but I think that was a criticism that appeared in about all of his earlier works, that he takes a lot of research and puts almost too much in there. No, not almost. He does put too much in there.
Can we go back to the introduction for a moment?
Of course.
Because this is another, not bugbear, but it goes back to why I don't like calling this a pure historical. And it's to do with research, and it's to do with factual accuracy and everything. Because he says, I've researched it and blah, 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 but I've taken tremendous liberties with the history. Now, the problem is, there is a lot made in this book about the Doctor mustn't change history. And if the author's already changed it, then it's a little difficult to know who I should be kind of worried about in terms of the web of, the new adventures thing of the web of time and everything. And yeah, I mean, okay, there's the science fiction stuff because the Doctor's got his tracer. He does that wonderfully believable bit with the sonic screwdriver where he scares the horses. So it's not pure history, but if you've kind of rewritten bits of history anyway, it's very difficult to kind of take the threat to time seriously if you've introduced fictional characters but also mix them in with real characters. Now, I'm guessing that the Rock is a real place. So, this whole thing, it's this 50 years or so before the Crusades that we knew with Richard and Joanna and everything. So it's obviously based on real things. But I've always got this kind of thing. It's the same with Marco Polo. So I'm not just picking on David here. It's a genuine thing. If you've rewritten history to suit the story, maybe then kind of stating, we mustn't adjust history and Philippe mustn't get the skull. Oh, that was a wonderful moment where there is literally the Jesus Christ joke.
Yes, that was good.
Just, I did not see. I should have seen that coming, and it was just like, oh. I said some wonderful bits. I loved the fact that we now know that the Iliad was written by a woman.
Yes.
Except, of course, that scroll was burned. Oh God, no! We've lost the Library of Alexandria again. And a lot of people online, compared this to the Crusade and everything, but I think it's much closer to a different TV story. I think this is structurally very similar to the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve.
Yes, I can see what you mean by that. Yep. Because
it's two religious factions, neither of which I know anything about. I'm not a religious person whatsoever. So that also put me off the book at the time as well. You've got two religious factions, history cannot be changed. Companion has fallen in love with local character. Doctor is off doing things in the background involving an apothecary. Just kind of. And again, it builds up to this. Yeah, the burning alive and everything at the end is horrendous. It's. Oh, yeah, I don't like that bit.
It's very, very. I mean, for a book that, yes, there's brutal moments throughout. but you really don't expect it to be that brutal at the end, and it really is horrendous.
Everyone goes on about the New Adventures as being sex obsessed. I think this is one of the most violent ones there is, and it's not fantasy violence. This is people being tortured in front of red hot fires, strapped to metal chairs. This is it's horrible. So I would have liked an afterword stating what actually happened and which of the characters were real, because I would have found that fascinating. Because of course, you've got the bit where Benny and Guy go off to find supplies and everything. It's like, so Guy of course is not real. Benny of course is not real. Sorry listeners, Benny is not real.
Don't tell Lisa Bowerman.
Benny is very real. I tell you what, I know this is, 4 years before Oh No It Isn't. I could hear Lisa Bowerman reading all of Benny's lines.
Completely agree.
I would have just liked to have known what the reality of this was and who actually survived, who actually was there. So was there this fake skull of Jesus doing the rounds, or was that invented?
I do like the fact that it does make you think, was it real, was it not? And it shows you that he's done something rather clever there to make you question how much is reality, how much is fictional. I mean, it could all be fictional for all I know. I really don't know. I haven't looked it up. I've just been too bloody busy.
Yeah, no, so I've been on Google today, but I've struggled to find a good site about this particular, I think if we'd done this like 3 or 4 years ago, Google was a lot better and I probably would have found it so much easier.
Yeah, without AI generated answers, even though I tried to switch them off. But, God.
The other question so 99% of the characters are completely anonymous in terms of kind of looks and sounds. Guzman.
Yes.
Has an Iberian accent.
So he's Spanish then.
Right, is that what it is? I didn't get around to Googling it.
Iberian, because Iberia Airways are the Spanish national carrier.
Oh, okay. But that ties in with my whole, where are we? What?
Yeah.
I didn't know that's what an Iberian accent was. I certainly wouldn't have known in 95.
No, I definitely didn't then. It's only since I really started traveling a lot more and going to and spending an awful lot of my time in Spain every year. So that's how I know. But and like Iberian ham. Now that next time you're in the supermarket, you might see like a leg of lamb or something like that, or a leg of pork, and that's Iberian ham. No, it wouldn't be pork. It wouldn't be Iberian lamb. It'd be Iberian ham. So yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just thinking Spanish TV is probably populated with Iberian ham as well. But
it is. Trust me, I watched the Spanish soap opera when I was in Salou this year. It was awful. It was awfully good, but awful. It was like that one in Friends where they have the push her down the stairs, push her down. It's awful. Yeah, crap.
And I say kind of, I've got my notes here about who some of the characters were, because by the time I'd finished reading it, I'd forgotten who was on which side. Guzman apparently is one of the baddies. He had a papal candidate killed. But it's like, I would have liked more guide to the sounds of the words, to the voices, ages, everything. Because again, 1242, average age. I know there were a lot of people who were older, but I was having trouble getting a grip on the age of all these people as well. Because the refugees are a very mixed bunch. You've got the Apoca 3, who I think was young, but I wouldn't swear to it.
Because I'm just thinking, that you could have done a solution to the problem. Surely you could, one side they could have had Spanish sounding names, and the other side could have had French sounding names.
Yeah,
that would have been an easy fix there. Would have made it
so much easier, and I think it is because you've got a very blanket feel to the characters and the names that this book requires. I had to really focus on this.
Yes.
I've been reading for pleasure, been reading for the YouTube channel, been reading for podcasts and stuff. This is the book that has demanded the most focus to keep track of where I am, who is where, and And especially when you get introduced to a character, you think, oh, right, we get the character, we get a description of who he's dead. So this is Eric Saywood on steroids, basically.
Yes, that's a really apt description. I like that one. I just we've mentioned Guy a few times, of course. He becomes a love interest for Benny, and as you said, she remembered him and kept his name for young Peter when he comes along many years later. But coming back to this, I didn't get the relationship that I remembered between them. It's like they're a bit flirty, but I didn't get romantic, and I didn't get somebody who I'll remember forever. And then, of course, this is apparently meant to trigger into events for human nature, so the Doctor can experience love. And while I found that he was well written, he was interesting enough as a character. I mean, the whole background in being a former Templar, the horse's tail being cut off, all this stuff, great detail. But as a romantic character, I just didn't feel it.
This reminded me, because I knew that it's big romance, and it's romance. It's not flirt. It's not one night stand. It's romance. It's love. It's everything. And I knew that it set up the whole events of human nature. Basically, those two books need to be read back to back as a continuous thing, because it really does make human nature so much more understandable. But yeah, it felt almost like Romeo and Juliet, because when you actually look at it, Romeo and Juliet were only together for 5 days, resulted in huge amounts of death. I mean, she has a go at Ace, which I'll get to in a moment. And they're saying, oh, Ace was all for the quickies and everything like that. It's like, Benny, you spent literally one night with him and didn't bang him. Where was this big romance? Where was all the kind of... It was a little bit of flirtatiousness, but it wasn't, And yeah, when you realise that the whole book takes place over about a week, it's just like, yeah, this was not a really in-depth relationship. This was not the kind of big romance I was expecting.
Yeah, you've met somebody for a few days, like you're on holiday. It's almost like a holiday romance without anything more than holding hands and a quick kiss. And I know Benny is open-minded and everything, and yeah, that bit where she's pleading with Guy to come into the TARDIS at the end, he would have made a really interesting companion. Bearing in mind, it's 1242. I mean, he's would have been almost like Katarina style levels of knowledge in some ways, But there's the problem. She's from the 20-something century. He's from the 13th century. They're not going to have much to discuss over the dinner table. Yeah. Yeah. So I've just now got the movie trailer. He was from the 12th century. She was from the 26th century. He was a knight. She was an archaeologist. Together they were knight and archaeologist. It's a shame that there wasn't day or something. Oh wow.
Mind you, if they had banged, it would have been a surprise night.
Very good. There's one for the Benny fans there. Yeah, it just wasn't the way I remembered it at all, and the way that people talk about it. So it's interesting revisiting now.
I'm convinced that the only reason she remembers him so vividly, bearing in mind, a lot of the time in the rest of the book, she's thinking about her exes as well anyway, is because of that final scene. I don't think it's the rest of the book she's remembering. I think it's the sacrifice at the end that she's remembering, and she mistakes that and her feelings and her shock from that as something more.
I think that's a fair comment. I think that there's been trauma there, particularly with the things that she's witnessed and heard about as well. And of course, that's going to have a lasting impact. And perhaps it's almost that emotional resonance that's there is almost like survivor guilt in a way as well. That he's come back to that, and
I think it is exactly that. So the big question is Guy alive at the end of the book?
I would say yes. I always thought he was. I always thought he'd survived. I thought he was one of those characters who'd be strong enough. I mean, but yes, you could question it. But is he dead within a day? The way things are going.
Because again, the other thing is, Benny is a historian and an archaeologist. She's got a time machine. She's got access to look at all the other books, across age. Every single person in history seems to be look-upable on the kind of like the intergalactic equivalent of Wikipedia. Surely, if once the survivor guild had settled down and everything, she would have Googled him and found out if there was any evidence afterwards.
You would think so.
Yeah.
Space Future Google, of course.
Yeah. Copyright Terry Nation.
Or Space Time Telegraph.
Hell, she could have got the time and space visualizer out the cupboard and, checked in on him afterwards.
Yeah. And so I've just got an extra fact about the Sanctuary cover for us.
Oh, go on.
That this is courtesy of I Who. In addition to writing Sanctuary, David A. McIntee supplied the pencils for the cover.
Oh.
There we go. Have a bonus factoid.
Yeah.
So obviously Edinburgh Castle was in his thinking with David being from Falkirkshire.
So yeah, I don't get the romance. I think it is very much a shock survivors guild type response. And then the fact that the 12th Doctor still remembers him, it's just like, really? Really?
Well, we'll maybe find out a reason for that before too long. But as to why there would be a mention there, as you're talking about the Big Bang Generation novel.
Yes.
Absolutely. But we will come to that very, very soon.
And my ace comment.
Yes.
I've got to get this out of my system. She's left the books. Can she stop being referenced? Oh, the TARDIS feels so empty. Oh, I wish Ace were here. Yes. God! She's gone. You've got Benny. Focus on Benny. Stop thinking about the X. Yeah.
Yes. That's very true.
I did not want the Ace references. I could have done without all of those.
Yeah.
Because then I would have felt that the Doctor actually was focusing on Benny.
Yeah. Because they are the New Adventures, and it's slightly, considering that the New Adventures were taking Doctor Who forward, there was always that insular, slightly backward-looking references back to Ace when you're sort of like, okay, this is really the time for Benny to shine. She's the new girl on the block, and this is a really good chance in this little run of books where she's the only companion. We've had it in Infinite Requiem, then of course we're going to have Human Nature, so it's Benny's time to shine, but it's definitely, that does slightly detract. And so why don't we pause again and have another reading for the book, again courtesy of Dave Steele.
Smoke stung Benny's eyes as soon as she stumbled out the TARDIS's door, and waves of heat rolled over her despite the snow. She had been standing in the square just a few steps from the TARDIS for several seconds before she realised that her legs weren't working and that she was no longer moving. Scattered timbers and chunks of masonry were spread all around the square, the flames that wrapped them obscuring the vague shapes of the various bodies that were slumped between the burning skeletons of the buildings. The village square was as hot as the centre of an oven, but Benny still felt cold, her thoughts and emotions churning as darkly as the thick smoke. He had cared after all, she knew. Somehow, she was used to that from him. Some part of her mind told her that his loss was sad, but that there would be others. Until now, she had believed it. He might have got out, the Doctor said quietly. His horse isn't here. He could be anywhere within 12 square miles by now. And if he didn't? The soldiers' horses are gone too. Perhaps they captured it or it ran from the flames. There had been so many men opposing him. Too many. The Doctor didn't answer, which didn't surprise her. What could he have said? Some speech about noble self-sacrifice, no doubt. She didn't want to hear it. The smoke had faded into a grey blur, and she couldn't really have said whether it was through tears, detachment, or even whether her eyes were still closed, though the gentle hum that pervaded the air indicated that she had returned to the TARDIS. She didn't even remember doing so. The normally atmospheric stone had never seemed such a cold and hollow shell, and neither had she. the cynical part of her mind that had so often held her in good stead against the wonders she'd seen in her time in the TARDIS. She knew Guy would have been cut to pieces in seconds, and it numbed her to the core. She hadn't realised it was possible to feel so cold and lonely, with no other emotions intruding, and she longed not to be realising it now. If there's an awkward way of doing things, I'll find it. How typical to be able to recognise, well, love, only in hindsight. Only when the pain showed it up for what it was. The doctor had seen it, of course, she realised, even though she hadn't. She was wide awake, but could already feel the memories weaving themselves into nightmares around her. More bad memories and bad dreams for her collection, as if Vandor Prime, Kyle and all the suffering and death she'd seen in her travels hadn't left her enough of those already. Its mathematically generated environment poised and spread across all the possibilities of the universe, the TARDIS was at rest. The doctor had wrapped Benny in a thermal blanket with visible concern as shock took hold of her. She shook, as if all the energy in her body was being drawn from maintaining temperature and circulation and was being rerouted into trying to prop up her emotions. We could go back after the fires have burnt themselves out, the doctor offered. At least you would know, one way or the other. Intellectually, of course, she knew that even if he survived the battle, he would have died 1,200 years before she was even born. At least, however, she wouldn't have to see his torn and scorched flesh cooling in the mud. Perhaps, she thought sadly, he might even have found the life of peace he had wanted. At least, she could believe that he had, if she didn't know better. She knew she didn't want to know any better. He had challenged the soldiers with such energy and vitality that she could easily imagine him sweeping through them and making a daring escape, perhaps jumping from the wall as she had about 1,000 years ago. Or so it felt. That was a better image to risk seeing every time she closed her eyes than one of her corpse. The thought hurt with each breath, as if her lungs were wounded. She shook her head, needing to free herself from the ties to the battlefield. If she didn't find a way to face up to never seeing him again, she would go mad. The decision was painful, but she had to at least prevent him from having given himself for nothing. A phrase flashed through her mind. Until I see a body, he's not dead. Perhaps, she hoped, she could convince herself that this was a truism. She opened her eyes to find the doctor watching her worriedly. He's still alive, as far as we know. I couldn't face knowing any further. Not so soon. Do you understand how it feels? She knew she was anything but the only person ever to feel such enforced and sudden emptiness, but it was a lonely feeling, and she needed understanding more than anything. She wished Ace was still here. She would have understood. Perhaps, he said neutrally, his expression never wavering. Then set the controls somewhere far away from here. Somewhere I can take my mind off it all. She knew that if she was left to her own devices, she would brood for weeks on end, and she knew that that road led to trauma and depression. She'd be damned if she'd ever let herself slip into that. Guy wouldn't have wanted that. He'd have wanted her to sing songs about him. Take your mind off it. Exciting diversions, of course. How about Blackpool? I meant to go once before, but never quite got there. His usually infectious enthusiasm washed over her like water from a duck's back, perhaps because it was so obviously intended to try bringing her out of her shell. She half expected him to try crushing a lager can against his forehead to convince her to smile again. She wondered just how diverting something would have to be to dull the pain. It was worse this time than it had been with Kyle. At least with betrayal you had someone to blame and pass the bad feelings on to. She felt that she'd never really leave this place behind. Not inside. Whatever. Let's just get the hell out of here.
Thank you once again, Dave. Now, of course, James, I would think it's fair to say that it's hard to know where to stand in this one, because I don't actively dislike it, but I don't actively love it either.
I am 100% with you on that. It's a book that I read it. I then I reread a synopsis of it so that I could kind of make sure I'd understood I wish the Doctor Who reference guide was still online, because those synopses were so useful.
They were great. They were really good.
I've got them all saved. I cheated. I got them all saved.
So I spent several afternoons reading this on a hot Spanish week, and you just no. I know I'm joking.
But I genuinely I think it is not the great romance that people say it is. I think it is a very well researched, very well presented historical, but it needed another edit. And I don't know if that's David or if that's Virgin or where that problem comes from.
Yeah.
I mean, we could have done without the chase sequence through the TARDIS with all the rooms and everything.
Yeah. But again, this is filling out the word count for Virgin. I mean, this is quite a long book. It's 297 pages.
It's way over the average book length for Virgin.
Because I always tend to think Virgin books being about 250 pages.
Yeah. I think they were aiming for 75 to 80,000 words or something, and this is about 90,000.
Yeah.
So it could easily have been cut down. So yeah, I do wonder why it was left so long word count wise. So I don't know who is responsible for it not being a top ranking book.
Yeah, because there's so much in there. I mean, as I said, and we both agreed earlier on, that if this had the BBC New Series format book and you're talking 50,000 words, that would have been a very, very good novel.
However, I've got one really genuinely important and very relevant question.
Okay.
I mean, would BBC New Adventures A, have touched a pure historical, and B, one that is so very heavily religious?
Well, I think the second one, not a chance. They wouldn't have gone anywhere near religion with the new series. Possibly in Russell's time, they might have challenged it early on. He might have let some of it go through, but genuinely, I don't think so. I mean, given that, when Big Finish released Blood Tides, they got letters of hate because they were talking about Charles Darwin and evolution and not creationism.
I think the comment I want to make is, okay, it's not a book that appealed to me, but I am damn glad it was written.
Yeah.
Because I think the whole too broad and deep for TV, that tagline that they had on the books, this is actually a really good example of it. It's touching topics that couldn't be done on TV, eras that couldn't realistically be done on TV. So, yeah, it's not a book aimed at me, but it is a really good scenario for Doctor Who.
Yes.
And I think that's my main feedback on it, is that, yeah, I'm not a hack and slay person. I love Benny getting drunk and making the still, and that was great when getting the alcohol and having to make sure there's no traces of it left behind, so that they don't use this future medical knowledge. And her nicking the not Napoleon brandy, but Napoleon's brandy.
That was a good gag.
Yeah, there's some brilliant bits in there. So I'm torn on it. I really am. I think it's an important book, and it sets up human nature. I've got such a much better understanding of the book of human nature now that I've revisited Sanctuary.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing as well. It really does show that these were a continuing series with consequences, with implications, with character development.
Yeah.
Which you can't necessarily say about the NSAs, but that's because that's not the market they were aiming for.
No, they were very much going for the younger market who are...
And the standalone stories,
Let's have a quick look to see how Sanctuary scored in the mega DWM poll in issue 265, where readers wrote in and ranked all their novels. And Sanctuary came at 27th out of 61, so I think that's probably a fair position. It was just behind Left-Handed Hummingbirds and Set Piece. and slightly in front of Theatre of War and Head Games. I dispute Theatre of War's position because I
I'd like to
love that
say,
book.
I agree with the 27 out of 61, but I don't agree with the books either side of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But say it has done, though, what a good Virgin Doctor Who book should do, is it's made me go, yeah, just reading for pleasure, I need to go back and revisit kind of certain eras, because yeah, I'd forgotten that this actually carried on sort of from the end of Infinite Requiem, because they're talking about where they've just left.
Yep.
So it's just like, yeah, okay, maybe I need to do Infinite Requiem to remind myself. I don't think I ever read it.
Oh, well, we featured it recently, of course, on the podcast, and we had the lovely author Daniel Blythe on with some reading, so you can always go back, read the book, and then come back. And you can listen to the Prelude rather than have to read it in DWM. So there we go. It has a nice, easy way around it. Now, of course, this was reviewed in Doctor Who magazine when it was the lovely Craig Hinton in charge of the Shelf Life column. James, would you care to read what the lovely Craig had to say about it?
Forced to abandon the TARDIS when it is caught in the gravity of a black star, the Doctor and Bernice find that the ship's escape pod, the Jade Pagoda from Iceberg, has deposited them on a hillside in France during the 13th century. As is the way of these things, they are immediately separated. The Doctor pretends to be an ambassador from the Scottish court, Jean Forgeron de Gallifrey, if you please, while Benny runs into a disgraced Templar and ends up in the Rock of the Cathares, a sanctuary from the cruelty of the Inquisition. The problem is, both the Doctor and Benny know that the rock is destined to be attacked, and its inhabitants murdered, and attempting to alter that could have dire consequences for the future history of Europe. Furthermore, there is a spy and a murderer in the rock, as well as a religious icon that could have a catastrophic effect on the development of Christianity. Add to this Benny's growing feelings for her Templar friend, and you have David A. McIntee's Sanctuary, ISBN 0426204395, the first purely historical new adventure. Like David's earlier books, the historical detail is flawless. David's enthusiasm for research is obvious from the first page. Unfortunately, without any science fiction input to distract him, David has rather gone to extremes in Sanctuary. The weight of period references distract from the plot. I soon grew tired of reaching for my dictionary upon encountering words like glaive, hauberk, and banneret, especially when they occur in lengthy passages of detailed description. The supporting characters are fascinating. Guy de Carnac, the Templar Benny becomes involved with, is a mixture of thug and philosopher. Guzman of the Inquisition is deliciously cruel. Even among all this local colour, the Doctor and Benny have rarely been better written, especially the latter. Benny's bittersweet romance with de Carnac is deep and moving. I'd advise you to stock up with Kleenex.
It's not that good.
Oh, I don't know. My main complaint is with the excessive and intrusive continuity references. Many Virgin authors have a fondness for including Star Trek continuity. It can provide a brief titter for those in the know, but in Sanctuary, David has gone too far with Romulan Ale and Mount Seleia. However, this is nothing compared to the sledgehammer subtlety Doctor Who references which mercilessly batter the reader. That aside, Sanctuary is the best of David's 3 books. Even if you don't like historicals, I suggest you give it a try. You'll be pleasantly surprised by what you find.
And it gets 4 stars as well, out of 5. So,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what Craig said, and I deliberately had avoided reading that review. I'd found it and just sort of write this there to find out what Craig thought. And I think it's fair to say that he's very much what he said is what we've said. We're on the same lines. There's a decent story in there, but you're being battered over the head with whale-sized references to words we don't know, the research, and so on. So, yeah, but I mean, it's, as you said, it is a decent read.
Yes.
Now, why don't we have a look at Goodreads to find out what the readers think of it? And Doctor Who Sanctuary by David A. McIntee has a rating of 3.49. It's had 178 ratings and 21 reviews. Of those, 5 stars 12%, 4 stars 39%, 3 stars 35%, 2 stars 11%, 1 star 1%. I'd probably be in the 3-star camp with this one. So
yeah, same here.
So, James, would you like to kick us off with one of the reviews there, which is a 5-star review? And who's it from?
This is from someone called Daniel Cork. Daniel, if you're out there, thank you for this. Thank you for whenever you did it. Even though the Virgin New Adventures is a range that has always been mixed with fans, we have so much to thank for it. After all, if we didn't have these novels, we might not have had the Revival series. This range of books has a lot of duds, but also a lot of classics to make up for it. Sanctuary is one I've been meaning to read for a long time, but because I was hoping for it to be a classic, I was afraid it'd end up being a dud. David A. McIntee has written a bloodthirsty, pure historical that shows history at its ugliest. It's a story filled to the brim with violence, corrupt politics, intertwined with corrupt religion, conspiracies, and treachery. But it's also a deep and meaningful love story for Bernice Summerfield. The characterization in this novel is superb. The bond between Bernice and Guy de Carnac is incredibly moving, and it's easy to see why they fall in love. Overall, an incredibly bleak novel that really gives you an idea of just how brutal this time was in history for France, and the many heartbreaks it no doubt caused. 9 out of 10.
Interesting. He definitely enjoyed it. More than we did, but yeah, it's funny how these interpretations of the romance, but
I think romance is a very personal thing.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, well, I've got a 4-star review here from Mikey. Let's see if Mikey mentions it. A really enjoyable, pure historical that really put me in mind of the pure historicals of the First Doctor's era. As is often the case with historicals, it doesn't shy away from the uglier aspects of the past, and with a story like this, it would be impossible to. While I've struggled before with some of the New Adventures writers delving into being grim and edgy, this is one story where these aspects are handled well, and it never feels like McIntee is just trying to revel in the suffering of the characters for the sake of it, which is always a big plus. It's also very good for how it handles Benny, as we get to see a side of her which we haven't really had much of before as she gets to know Guy de Carnac. They both have a really interesting dynamic with one another, and it feels very genuine and engaging to read. The Doctor feels like he takes a bit of a backseat in proceedings, but he's still characterised well, if a little weary, considering recent developments. I did like the Jean Forgeron de Gallifrey reference, so you've got a John Smith of Gallifrey, which is not too bad. James, you've got a 3-star there review for us next.
From Brad.
Good old Brad. He sounds American.
I think Australian because I think of Brad and Beth from Neighbours.
Oh, Beth Willis.
Oh, Brad. Anyway.
It's funny how our brains go in similar but different opposite directions.
Yeah, right. 3 stars. Brad. Right. This was by far the best David A. McIntee story I've read in the New Adventures series. The story and characters were reasonably well thought out and memorable, and everything moved along at a decent pace. I still find he tends to use 3 words when one will do, and I'm not a fan of long passages describing battles or other action scenes. But I was pleasantly surprised by this title. After reading McIntee's last few entries in the series, I really hadn't been looking forward to this title.
I can kind of get that because I didn't enjoy White Darkness when it came out. I enjoyed it more coming back to it because I think David is somebody who's evolving as a writer and he gets better with every passing book. And I think that The 11th Tiger, which will be featured soon in the All New Adventures of the Doctor Who Book Club, is a really good read. But I've
got very happy memories of that one, actually, so yeah.
Need to reread that one soon. Well, we can discuss this later between ourselves. But what we will discuss now is a 2-star review from Chris with a K, K-R-I-S. Chris says, "This is one I disliked more than a lot of other people, and reading it in sequence hasn't increased my opinion. I found going into it, I only remembered the beginning, the end, and the fact that Benny had a romance with a possibly doomed knight in medieval southern France." Oh, he got the fact it was France. "The reason it turned out is because that is more or less all there is to it. The Doctor has a locked room mystery, and there is some faffing about with an artefact people want. But that isn't what it is about. Really, this is a piece of historical fiction where Benny gets to have a romance, like Doctor Who doing Outlander. However, McIntee is nothing like Gabaldon. I get no sense of place or atmosphere. The inevitable ending is not only obvious, but manages to lack the sense of impending doom many Doctor Who stories do so well. I know a lot of people like that Benny gets a starring novel, but this doesn't really serve her well or give her more depth. It's for her to have a terrible time in order to set up the events of human nature, aping what was already done with Ace in Love and War. Now, it is not terrible, just a bit meh. The action sequences are well written, the Virgin Range gets to do their first pure historical, and staying prior to 19th century for the entire adventure. A sign of better things to come. Again, I think that's a lot in there to agree with.
Yeah.
Definitely, I think it's some very interesting points there.
So, quick question, because he says the inevitable ending. Do you think it was obvious that Guy was going to die because he's having a romantic liaison with a companion?
You would think that. You would definitely think that. I think you've got a point there, because it just seems to be that's what you do. Like Ace has obviously a few interests, like Jan, and
yes,
and off he goes. So yes. So maybe the surprise was that he didn't die. Probably.
Yeah, probably. Right.
Well, there were no 1-star reviews, which is nice, but there was another 2-star review. So would you care to tell us what that says?
Arthur B.
Not
right.
maybe it's Arthur Barville, not Arthur Darville.
Unfortunately, I rather bounced off this one. I didn't think the book was that rubbery. The treatment of the historical side of this story won't engage people who know the history of the Albigensian Crusade significantly better than the readership McIntee is aiming for do. And the handling of the Doctor and Benny doesn't quite work for me, since the story really would suit the first Doctor and the approach of his early historicals more than the 7th.
Now that's an interesting point. Could this have worked as a First Doctor new adventure, or First Doctor missing adventure?
Tell you where this would have worked. This would have worked well between Dalek Invasion of Earth and The Rescue, because then you've got Barbara, who can take the Benny role. You've got Ian, who can do his knight sword and sorcery, and you've got the Doctor, who can go on holiday or something.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where it would work. Just because as soon as I read that, I thought that's where this would work and it would fit in. So, yeah, I agree with you in that. Would it have worked better? Not sure. I think that probably the pacing, it probably does feel more like a First Doctor adventure than a 7th one, because with the new adventures, obviously we're used to a lot more happening and explosions and things going on, and very much the tone of the new adventures was sci-fi. So this is probably, and as you said earlier, this does jar because of the tone of it and the setting.
It's very telling as well that I think I worked out that the next one is the Roundheads in November 97.
Wow.
I don't think there's a pure historical between the two.
There's not. You're absolutely right.
But it's very interesting that the BBC PDAs did a lot of them. You got Wages of Sin, Witch Hunters, so they were way more into it than the Virgin books were.
Well, we've also got additional thoughts from people to share their thoughts on this book. One being former Big Finish producer and TV Doctor Who script editor Gary Russell, and the other being our own Dave Steele, and they're going to share their thoughts on Sanctuary as well.
My name's Gary Russell, and I didn't write Doctor Who Sanctuary, but I wrote a few other books around the same time that David was writing Sanctuary. More importantly, I was reviewing them for Doctor Who magazine. And it is no exaggeration to say that back then in the 90s, and ditto in 2026, if anyone comes up and says to me, what's your all-time favourite Virgin New Adventure, I will always say Sanctuary, because I think what David did so brilliantly is he threw away the Virgin Rulebook completely. The Virgin Rulebook seemingly at that point to be mostly cyberpunk, good science fiction, detailed, adult, blah, 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 blah. And instead he wrote the most beautiful Doctor Who history book. And I love Guy. I thought he was brilliant. I think his relationship in Benny is the most realistic love affair that I think the Virgin New Adventures had written up to that point, and probably ever after. It was like reading, for me, it was like reading David Whittaker's The Crusades novelisation, which I still think, although I don't think a great deal about the Crusaders as a story, I think the Target book is utterly beautiful. It is a very cleverly written historical epic that's got a spaceship in it at some point. And I felt that about Sanctuary, that this was the most worthy successor to David Whittaker's writing that we'd come across. I fell in love with it. I just fell in love with everything about the book, the story, the characters, the interpersonal relationships. It just really worked, and it sung for me at a point where I was getting quite bored with endless spaceships and ray guns and troopers and shouty and Ace and Benny shacking everything that moved for no readily apparent reason. And here was this absolute, it was like he'd thrown a stone into the pond and the ripples were coming out, which was the story, and at the point where he threw the stone in, the pond was just completely still again. And you just went, this is lovely, this is calm, this is what I want. Which is ironic, because as a story, it's got lots of action and lots of adventure and lots of blood, but it had that historical oomph about it that I didn't know I was missing until I read Sanctuary and went, this is what I've been missing all this time.
Hello, David here with my thoughts on Sanctuary by the other David A. McIntee. Now, I read this book pretty much when it came out. I was reading quite a few of the new adventures as they were published at this point, but there was a time when I went back to the start because there had been a few that I hadn't read, and I reread a few and read some of the ones I hadn't read in the build up to the 50th book coming out. But I read Sanctuary as it was published, and listeners, I have a sort of reflex memory for this book that I always sort of say whenever it's mentioned, that I always remember that it took me 6 weeks to read it, to get through it I should say, and then I read Human Nature in 3 days. I was reading on my commute to, because I hadn't long started at Abbey National when I was reading this. In fact, I remember that Decarnac was my password or my sign-in password for for a few weeks, for about a month. I think you had to renew them every month, and it was my password. That's always stuck in my head because I made a mistake once and I had to give my password to my supervisor to go in and fix what I'd done, and I had to tell her it was a French name, and she gave me a look. But yes, this took me 6 weeks. Now, it would average at this point, it would take me about a week and a half tops to read an average new or missing adventure, and 6 weeks was interminable. It was a chore. I just remember endless, stodgy pages full of description and very little incident or character stuff to kind of convince me to keep going. It was one of those books, you have to force yourself to read it. It sat in my jacket pocket for days, I do remember, though, feeling quite sorry for Bernice at the end, that Guy, as I've always called him, has died, and the doctor and her sort of dealing with it, and it was really quite, I remember feeling quite emotional about that, and then you read Human Nature, which is just like, gosh, for better or worse, maybe the root of a lot of the ills of modern Who, but yeah, like, with no disrespect, Mr. McIntee, it was not, because I'd really enjoyed White Darkness and First Frontier, so I was looking forward to this one, and I quite fancied the idea of a pure historical. But no, I remember nothing about it apart from vague senses of descriptions and just being so relieved when it was finally over. Sorry, Mr. McIntee.
There you go, James. Now you know why there's a reference to Guy de Carnac in Big Bang Generation and BBC Books.
I kind of guessed that might be what it was.
Yeah.
The fact that Guy is also in the Big Finish, in the Peter's middle name and everything, I think I kind of guessed that there was a positive view of it.
Gary was a fan. Now, of course, Sanctuary managed a sequel, but not in print. A sequel of sorts is probably fair to say, because back in September 2002, BBV Audio released The Quality of Mercy. James, this is one obviously that you listened to at the time. I've only recently heard it, so it was something new for me. Could you kindly tell us what the cover blurb tells us about it?
In medieval Europe, the arrival of two strangers brings mystery and conflict to a peaceful market town. The Inquisition is called for with the capture of a foreign sailor. He looks like a man, but his clothes and language imply that he may be something more, or perhaps something less. And what kind of ship sails through the sky? The Inquisition discover that some questions are too dangerous and some answers too sensitive. Soon, their fate and that of their prisoner become bound up with the second visitor to the town. A disgraced former Templar knight turned wandering mercenary, Guy de Carnac.
There we go. And the cast for this were Guy de Carnac, played by the mighty Joe Young, not the monkey guy, the sailor by Nigel Fares, Woman by Jackie Scarvellis, Merchant by Martin Broad, Reynard, Nigel Peaver, and The Priest by Martin Gregg. And of course it was written by David McIntee. So let's hear a brief excerpt of that.
Does this town have a farrier?
Over there on the corner of the square. You can't miss it.
My thanks.
Sir Knight.
Yes?
Sir Knight, I didn't expect your parties to arrive so soon. Where are the others? Have they gone to the inn?
What party, priest? I travel alone.
Aren't you with the Inquisition I sent for?
No.
But you are with one of the military orders.
That has been my honour. Now, if you will excuse me, I must have a farrier to see to my horse's shoe.
You have travelled on crusades?
Yes.
Then you're precisely the man I wish to talk with. Sir...
De Carnac. Guy de Carnac.
I was hoping that you could help us with something. A delicate matter that a well-travelled religious man may be able to make sense of.
As I said, I must see to my mount's needs. Now, if you will...
Please. As an exchange, the church will pay for your horse to be reshod.
Oh, that's it. It's most kind of you. I can help no one if I don't know what it is that troubles them.
There's a man here. At least he appears to be a man.
Appears?
He arrived... Actually, he was taken from the sky.
From the sky?
From a ship that flew. Sir de Carnac, you may no longer be a member of a military order, but you are more well-travelled than any other man in the town. If anyone here can identify this man's clothing or speech, it is you.
And if I cannot? I haven't yet seen all that there is to see in the world. Thank the Lord there are still places which will be new and wondrous to me when I see them.
If his tribe and language are as unknown to you as they are to me, then I've lost nothing. I can see no harm in asking.
All right, priest. If you'll see to my horse's shoe, I'll question your stranger for you.
Here he is.
Is this your demon from the sky? He is but a man, and a frightened one at that.
He came from a ship that flew.
A ship that flew? Did it have feathers? A beak instead of a prow?
Well, not flew like a bird. It sailed by the wind like any other ship, but it floated among the clouds instead of in the water. We all saw it, everyone in the town.
And this man? Fell overboard, I suppose?
No, he swam.
Through the air? Without falling?
Well, he was holding on to the anchor rope.
Then he could be said to have simply climbed down the rope.
Yes, from a ship that flew. Isn't that strange enough?
Our conversation has already made it less strange. If we understand even more, how much less strange will he get? Still, with those silks and no tunic, he did not walk here. Not in this weather. You are a strange one, are you not?
Do you understand him?
No. He could but speak our tongue.
He has never said he cannot. Perhaps he merely feigns ignorance while he listens to us.
So, now he is a foreign spy. Those sounds are like those of the Moorish language, but it is not that tongue. I have heard tales of lands beyond Persia and the Silk Road. Perhaps it is their language.
And his clothes. Have you ever seen anything like them?
The cut of them, yes. On roads from Persia. But the cloth itself, it is not silk or wool or any other material I know. I cannot imagine how it was woven. But clothes do not make the man.
No, of course not.
There is the town, Father Baldwin.
Thank you, Reynard. It looks peaceful enough.
Yes.
Very well, let us find the village priest. I hope he hasn't summoned us over for nothing.
I've met him before. He wouldn't have sought help if he didn't have a problem that was beyond his means to deal with.
Then let us waste no time.
So, James, how did you find this one? Badoom tish.
On the shelf gathering dust. Because I did actually re-listen to it today because I thought, I know I've listened to it. I know. It's just, I've listened to it. It was on for 70 minutes. There was some stuff. I genuinely do not know what I heard. Sorry. This was not my favourite of the BBV releases.
It's trying to do science fiction in a subtle way in a historical setting.
Do you know what I thought it was? Because apparently David McIntee was at some point planning on doing some Guy de Carnac books.
That would make sense.
I think this was a subtle backdoor pilot. I know that because I was looking at various things because I was trying to do research, and I put the stuff in. The Sanctuary reviews and stuff came up, and in a couple of them they mentioned that there was some plan to do books. So I'm wondering if this was an attempt to do the pilot as an audio. Because I've also got one really big question, which ties in with something we've already discussed.
I was wondering that too, but I got given that there were references to "Have you loved Sir Guy" or whatever would say, or Guy as they call him in this. But and he does make references to a woman he once had affection for, and I'm assuming that was Benny. But it's not very clear if it is set before or after. You're absolutely right.
No. And
a star sailor, effectively.
There is a science fiction element to it. Some weird because I listened to it and I was thinking, if this was a prequel to Sanctuary, I think Guy would have mentioned this to Benny, and I think he would have been much more understanding of certain things in the book if this was the start of his science fiction adventures,
I think that does make sense.
Sanctuary and his eventual demise.
For me, it's a sequel. It's definitely a sequel, which shows that he survived at the end, went on, and he met an alien, but it's not an obvious alien. And I thought the music and sound design on this were fantastic. Which Nigel Fairs is brilliant. He is such a talent.
Oh, the music was gorgeous. I was quite happy to listen to the music.
It's an interesting one. I mean, I'm glad I've listened to it because it was something that I wouldn't normally listen to. And there are some nice moments in there, but generally it feels like an awful lot of people talking at each other. Yeah.
There is a very significant lack of action in it, which again is very atypical for the BBV stuff. There's usually more obvious threats. There's usually more obvious set pieces. Yeah, it just didn't really do much. It was bizarrely, there was a TV series called Sanctuary, an American science fiction thing. And I watched the first season of that, and I described that as a season that I have watched. I wouldn't have a clue what happened in it. And yes, I vaguely remember it's about giving protection to aliens and weird creatures and stuff. And it's just very strange that this Quality of Mercy, which is the prequel, sequel, sidestep, whatever, to Sanctuary, seems to be setting up Guy as a predecessor,
kind of the anti-Torchwood, where they help the aliens rather than murder them all. Anti-Torchwood, I don't remember her very well. Anyway, yes.
That's no. You're not
stand-up
you're not
comedian who used to
supposed to do the
support Frankie
jokes.
Boyle. So, yeah, interesting. But yeah, I'm glad I've heard it, but I can't say that many. I feel the urge to re-listen to it too soon. So, yeah, it's been done. So, James, you mentioned at the top your audio projects. Tell us a wee bit more about what you've got on there, and of course, the fact that one of your books has been listened to by the author. We're talking Daniel O'Mahony, who listened to some of Falls of Shadow, which was, of course, great for us to borrow, add some music and sound effects to. So thank you again for that.
So, I mean, it started out as a health thing. I can't remember if I said this last time or not. I had I've still got lung problems. And I've got focus problems. I've got terrible brain fog at times. And the way I started to get the breathing back under control and brain focusing, I realised that reading out loud was actually easier to focus on than reading silently. And it kind of started as a joke to myself, because I think it was still called Twitter. And, you had people like Clayton Hickman, who would do kind of like a TARDIS-themed advent calendar, and you had all kinds of people doing other things in the lead up to Christmas. And I thought, well, no one ever does the 12 days of Christmas. So I found a bunch of short stories. I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll record them, teach myself audio editing, get back into that, record them and everything. And I was going through them and thinking, well, actually, it's quite quick to do these audio things, because I worked out how to do the editing and everything. I thought, how long is it going to take to do a full book? And I thought, well, it's round about an anniversary-ish for Time Worm Genesis. So I thought, and that's a really, I remembered that as being kind of, everyone goes, it's so salacious and sex-based and everything. I just remembered it as kind of like lots of people running around shouting. So I thought, I'll do that. And actually kind of, it's like, I forgot it ended on cliffhanger. I'll do the next one. This one. I kind of got carried away, but I sat down and I thought, well, because I was putting them onto kind of like a blog type thing, which I realised was the wrong format for it. So I set up HB HooTube on YouTube, put the first ones up that I did, and I was thinking, well, do I go through all the Virginia adventures in order? And I thought, I don't really want to, because Big Finish have done some of them and done them really well as dramas and everything. And I thought, well, I don't want to kind of, tread on Big Finish toes and kind of put stuff up that is out there as a commercial product kind of thing. So I did the Time Worm because that felt natural. And then, of course, Time Worm overlaps with the Cat's Cradle thing. And I thought, well, we've got Love and War, but Big Finish had... And so I kind of drew up this list of ones that Big Finish had done and everything. And I realised that the next one I was going to do was Transit, which actually was a revelation, because that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be either. But then I thought, well, I'm getting a bit tired of Sylvester and Sophie. Not Sylvester and Sophie, of course, but trying to do the voices and everything. And I won't, because I'm very tactful. I try to be tactful these days. I was looking ahead and I thought, there's 2 or 3 books coming up that I don't want to do. Different reasons for not wanting to do them. I'm not going to say what they were, what the books were, or whatever. And so I thought, well, actually, I started off doing short stories. So I did some more short stories. And I thought, well, there's the whole PDAs, and there's the VMAs, and there's the kind of... And it just developed into this kind of like, yeah, I'd forgotten how brilliant the Wilderness years were. And I know it's something that is very relevant at the moment, because we're all talking about kind of, are we about to go into Wilderness Years 2 and everything? And I'm going to be tactful and say that I had forgotten how many bits from the Wilderness Years books get homaged in certain TV episodes. That is, to quote, I'm sorry, I haven't a clue, homage as in, he homaged me with a sawn-off shotgun, or the Great Train homagery. Yeah, the one I did recently, I had forgotten there was a scene in it. I was reading this scene and I thought, I can't believe I'm reading this. This is almost beat for beat reused in, I'm not going to say which, it's just like, and so yeah, I just got into the Virgins, the BBC's. Other people had done some of the early EDAs, so I filled in Legacy because that hadn't been done. And I did Birthright recently, and got another book recorded, and I had a hard drive failure. But by the time this podcast comes out, yeah, the next book will be out, and it is one that is actually a really bloody good book. And does it form the basis for a lot of the reboot series? I'm not saying yes
Absolutely.
or no.
And
but
of course, there is an episode of this
bits
podcast all about the writing of it as well. So go back and find that one when it comes out.
Yes. And once I've finished putting in I'm actually going to, because this book features K9, and I've decided that, yeah, I'm going to modulate K9's voice. The last thing I've got to do, now that I've recovered all the files and everything, is go back and redo K9's voice through all the chapters. And then, once it's done and uploaded, then I'm going to listen to the podcast, because I didn't want to be influenced.
And tell everyone where they can find the channel.
Yeah. So it is literally, if you go to YouTube and put HB WhoTube into the search box, there is about 20-ish complete novels, dozens of short stories. I did a Dalek week earlier in the year just because I felt like it. And so there's actually one of the Telos novellas is now on there. Yeah, it's just to say I find it very therapeutic to do. But I'm very glad that I changed my initial plan of doing all the Virgin books in order, because, yeah, I found some seriously
thank you very much for doing them, James.
On that channel now.
I always enjoy listening in when I get the chance to. And listeners, feel free to pop over and give James a follow on there.
Thank you.
And also, if you've enjoyed today's episode, you can give us a review on your podcast of choice. That would be very nice. Please and thank you. And of course, we have our social media. You can follow us on Facebook. We have Twitter at Power of 3 Pod, and that's 3 with the number 3. And indeed, we have Blue Sky as well, which is where James and I regularly chat quite a lot. And we are at Finished Zine. So, James, thank you once again for coming on and discussing with us. And I do have a song in mind for us, actually, to play out with.
Pleasure.
And, of course, this was actually by the same artist who had a song called Human Nature, which, of course, was next week out. It's Madonna. Madonna had a track out called Sanctuary, and she later did Human Nature. So I think she must have been secretly reading the New Adventures around this time. God bless you, Queen Madge. So, until next time, I've been Kenny Smith. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. I've been James Hadwen-Bennett.
Who needs the sun when the rain's so full of life? Who needs the sky? It's here in your arms. I want to be buried. You are